Most Big Ten fans think adding Maryland and Rutgers was just the conference making a smart, maybe calculated power move to grab two big TV markets. But the real reason it happened was because leaders were genuinely afraid they were about to lose Penn State to the ACC. I know that sounds off and not what everyone normally believes when it comes to Big Ten expansion. And if you're a Penn State fan or just someone who remembers the excitement of when the Big Ten got bigger, you might be thinking there's no way that was ever on the table. But when you actually look at the conversations that were had, have conversations with people behind the scenes on what went on, and you kind of discover more of the gentlemen's agreements that had gotten broken and what the ACC was doing at that exact same time, it was closer than anybody likes to admit today. You see, the Big Ten wasn't the only conference that knew conference expansion needed to happen. The ACC was moving toward it as well. The Big Ten was just the one that made the move before they did. So in this episode of the Big Ten Huddle, I'm going to walk you through the three specific moments that almost killed the entire Eastern expansion of the Big Ten, why Rutgers ended up being the only move that actually made sense, and what this history tells every Big Ten fan about how stable or vulnerable, you could say, this conference really is when the next round of TV contracts come up. If you care about your team's rivalries, scheduling, and the money that funds the facilities and NIL, this changes how you see the whole picture of the conference and kind of the whole picture of college football as well. Here's exactly what was happening behind the scenes that most people have never heard of or about. You see, the catalyst wasn't, some grand vision session in a back, boardroom or something like that. It was irritation inside of Penn State. You see, when Nebraska joined the Big Ten, it went against an unspoken gentleman's agreement that had existed among the older members. We might get into that in a different episode, but that's not what this episode's about. Penn State had been the last big addition before then, and adding Nebraska right after felt like kind of a breach to some inside the program. The frustration created an opening. At the same time, the ACC wasn't sitting still. They were actively courting Penn State. They were making additions and adjustments specifically designed to appeal to what Penn State might want in a conference home. For the Big Ten and Fox, that was a red alarm. That was red alarms going off. We need to fix this now. See, losing Penn State wouldn't just hurt the Big Ten's on-field product and media deals. It would have cascaded them. The old Pac-12 or Pac, whatever you want to call them, was still tied to, Pac-10, whatever it was still tied to the Big Ten through the Rose Bowl. The Pac, we'll just call them that for now, the Pac hadn't even started their own conference championship game until the Big Ten was also ready to do so. Both sides wanted equivalent paths to that historic matchup. Losing Penn State would have damaged leverage for both leagues. So the Big Ten and Fox didn't just react, they coordinated. They began working on an Eastern expansion specifically to close the door on the ACC before it could pull Penn State away. Without that coordinated push, without the urgency created by the Nebraska addition, the ACC's move, the whole thing might not have happened the way it did. I guess you could say Nebraska kind of saved the Big Ten in some ways when you look at it. But the payout ended up being excellent, and it became the defining success of the era of realignment. But it started from a place of protection, not pure ambition. This explains why the Big Ten feels so locked in today compared to some other chaos that we've seen elsewhere. You see, when Charlie Baker talks about national TV and TV contracts eventually determining the next phase of realignment, this story really does matter. Your team didn't just get a bigger conference by accident. It got one because the people in charge at the same time treated keeping their core intact like an emergency. The mainstream media loves to tell you about this clean story that the Big Ten's Eastern expansion was some flawless master plan everyone saw coming from a mile away. But that's not what the record shows at all. The real catalyst was Penn State's irritation over Nebraska joining the Big Ten right after them. It broke an unspoken gentleman's agreement. At the exact same time, the ACC was courting Penn State hard and tailoring moves to try and lure them away from the Big Ten. The Big Ten and Fox didn't expand east because they felt like they didn't need to. They felt like it didn't need to happen. But they did do it because it slammed the door shut before they lost an anchoring program that obviously has been huge even today and in recent past. That changes everything about how we should look at conference stability today. That context is why the choice of Rutgers specifically makes so much more sense once you stop listening to the simplified version. It wasn't about grabbing the flashiest name on the board or anything like that. Florida State or some other bigger brands were being discussed in some same circles. Boy, I bet they wish they had joined the Big Ten at that time. But Rutgers delivered some unique, immediate, high-value access to the New York City media market and a huge concentration of Big Ten alumni who actually had real wealth. So much so that some of the most, one of the cities with the most Big Ten alumni in it today is New York City. It's second or third right now. I can't remember. But these weren't just casual grads. These were the kind of people who buy season tickets, make major donations, and influence media deals. Rutgers gave the conference a physical presence near that audience so that they could actually go watch Big Ten games in person without flying across the country to do so. In a sport where perception, money, live attendance all feed into each other, that was a smarter strategic ad than it looked on the surface. The Rose Bowl connection added another layer of quiet pressure. If Penn State had left, it wouldn't have just become a Big Ten problem. You see, the Pac would have lost leverage too because conferences had aligned their championship game timelines and structure specifically so their championships would have clean equivalent paths to Pasadena. That tie made protecting Penn State a shared interest, even if nobody said it out loud at the time. You see, this one coordinated move between the Big Ten offices and Fox completely changed the trajectory of the conference without most fans ever seeing the strings being pulled. By launching the Eastern expansion of the Big Ten specifically to shut down the ACC's recruitment of Penn State, they didn't just add two teams, they protected the entire media and scheduling foundation that your team still benefits from today. That hidden blueprint of protect the core first, add value second is why the Big Ten had stayed more stable than conferences that chased the shiny new objects that ended with internal fractures. You see, the impact on the broader Big Ten wasn't just adding two more teams to the map, it diversified the media footprint in a way that made the whole league harder to raid later on. It gave the conference leverage in future negotiations because suddenly there was real East Coast presence and money flowing in from all kinds of directions that hadn't existed before. I mean, the money existed before, but you get what I'm saying? It wasn't flowing into the Big Ten before. It proved that when the Big Ten moves with urgency and coordination with its media partners, it can control outcomes instead of reacting to them. That's a lesson that still applies every time Baker or someone else floats the new realignment ideas of regionality like he's been talking about before on national television. For individual programs, the effects were even more direct. Penn State avoided what could have been a messy divorce and a step into a conference that was already showing signs of financial and competitive stratification. I mean, Penn State, you imagine how much Penn State would have regretted that decision today? Florida State wishes they would have came into the Big Ten. If Penn State had left, if Nebraska had left, like that was talked about before, it would have completely destroyed what is going on today for them being in the best conference in college football. They stayed in a league, they being Penn State, stayed in a league where their brand, history, and on-field expectations aligned with the top tier instead of becoming a big fish in a pond that was shrinking in relevance. Essentially, the Big Ten saved them from the fate of programs of Clemson and Florida State like that. Sure, Clemson won some national championships in the ACC, but everybody knew where the trajectory of the ACC was going when you had programs who didn't care. For Rutgers, the addition gave them a seat at a much bigger table with resources and exposure they wouldn't have had otherwise. And they delivered immediate value through that New York City alumni and media connection that justified the move faster than some skeptics predicted. For the rest of the Big Ten, whether you're a fan of Ohio State or Michigan or Iowa, Illinois, anywhere else on the map, this expansion made the conference itself more resilient. It reduced the chance that a rival league, a rival conference, which is kind of funny we talk about today because it's so college football-esque, but a rival conference could peel off a foundational member and create the kind of chaos that destroys rivalries and scheduling stability. Your annual games against traditional opponents stayed protected because the league prioritized keeping its house in order over chasing the next headline edition. You see, the Rose Bowl connection would have fractured the Pac-12 or the Pac-10, would have lost its aligned championship path. Media leverage would have taken a hit across multiple leagues, and the Big Ten's identity as the stable coast-to-coast powerhouse would have taken years to rebuild if it ever did. The fact that it didn't happen is why your team's conference feels so much more solid today than some of the alternatives out there, like the Big 12, like the ACC. In some ways, like the SEC. The bigger picture here is that realignment isn't usually the result of some mastermind in a room, moving pieces together. Oh, we'll get the best TV contract here, there, and the other. It's often the result of one program feeling slighted, another conference seeing an opening, and the threatened league moving fast enough to try and close it. The Big Ten passed that test in the early 2000s. They protected one of their anchor programs, added a market that delivered real value, and came out stronger than anyone would have thought on the other side. That's why stories like this still matter. When we hear about Baker talking about regional scheduling and football sports, and when the next TV deal cycle starts heating up, maybe we'll do an episode on that because there's a lot of stuff going on with that right there with Charlie Baker and him making comments recently. But the conference that almost lost Penn State and fixed it was a coordinated, value-focused move. It is a different animal than one that's just reacting to chaos. Your team's rivalries, your Saturday schedule, and the resources flowing into facilities and NIL collectives are all downstream of decisions like the one that brought Rutgers and Maryland into the conference. All of this reminds us that the Big Ten didn't just get lucky with expansion, they got smart when they were under pressure. And that matters more for the next 10 years than most of the hot takes you see on national TV. Thanks for watching all the way through for this episode. If it's changed how you think about the current realignment chatter, conference expansion, things like that, drop a comment and let me know. Was Rutgers the right call, or do you think they should have swung bigger? Do you think they should have got a Florida State? Do you think they should have went out and got somebody else, maybe a Syracuse or somebody like that? Subscribe for more Big Ten football and basketball analysis that cuts through the noise and actually connects the dots back to your team and what happens on Saturdays. No SEC bias here. We got you covered. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.